Well, good morning and welcome to the Wilson Center here in Washington, D.C. I'm Philip Rieker. I'm the chair of the Global Europe program here at the Wilson Center. And today we are absolutely delighted to welcome Mr. Oleksii Reznikov to the Wilson Center. As you know, Mr. Reznikov is Ukraine's former defense minister who led Ukraine's defense establishment in the lead up to Russia's full-scale invasion and during the first year and a half of the war that Putin has perpetrated against Ukraine. At the Global Europe program, we address vital issues affecting Europe in its engagement with the rest of the world. And our Ukraine in Europe initiative, launched last year, focuses on Ukraine's future in Europe and more broadly in the West, a choice that the Ukrainian people have taken. Working together with our fellow, Mariana Bujarin, GEP has hosted several events on the challenges and opportunities for Ukraine's future in Europe. And from its path forward towards the EU and full membership to repurposing Russia's frozen assets for Ukraine's defense and reconstruction. And so today's event on lessons from Ukraine's defense against Russia's invasion is another testament to our work here at the Wilson Center. And we look forward to this important and timely conversation. Indeed, next week will mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day, the Allied landing at Normandy, and ultimately the defeat of fascism by our generations before. And to paraphrase the message that then General Eisenhower sent to his troops on the eve of D-Day, your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened. He will fight savagely. But also, General Eisenhower reminded us that I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. And so, with that, I'm really delighted to introduce our leader here at the Wilson Center, President, Director, and CEO, Ambassador Mark Green. Now, Ambassador Green brings, I think, a particularly unique combination of experience to Wilson. His work as the administrator of the U.S. Agency for International Development gives him on-the-ground knowledge of the global challenges we face. And with democratic governments seeking new ways to cooperate effectively, Ambassador Green's work as president of the International Republican Institute, president and CEO of the Initiative for Global Development, and senior director at the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition gives us insight into just how we might meet that challenge. As ambassador to Tanzania from mid-2007 to early 2009, Ambassador Green knows firsthand how policy translates into progress on the ground. And his background as a four-term member of the U.S. House of Representatives, representing the great state of Wisconsin and its 8th district, is in itself an illustration of the idea behind the Wilson Center, a think tank created by Congress as a nonpartisan policy forum for tackling tough issues with Congress, with the administration, and the international policy community so that they can take actions well-informed. Indeed, Ambassador Green himself has visited Ukraine recently, and I'm very pleased to introduce Ambassador Green.
Thank you, Phil, and welcome to the Wilson Center. So 10 years ago, I was an election observer in Ukraine in my IRI days with Madeleine Albright. And I remember in those days the extraordinary courage of the Ukrainian people and their dedication to freedom and democracy at a time when there was tremendous pressure coming from Moscow. When I visited Ukraine earlier this year, as Phil mentioned, I saw that same courage. And I saw it in the face of obviously difficult circumstances. I traveled 1,300 miles around Ukraine with the United Nations. I was in Kherson, I was in Kharkiv, I was in Odessa, and everywhere I went, I kept hearing the same thing from the Ukrainian people. They would say, tell America we are tired but not exhausted. And it was something that was quite extraordinary to behold. How resilient the people of Ukraine were. When attacks would occur within hours, they were rebuilding and continuing their daily lives and continuing to build Ukraine's brighter future. I also remember when I traveled, as I went around, encountering a veteran, a soldier who had been part of the liberation of Bucha. And we were standing outside St. Michael's, that iconic, beautiful blue monastery. And he came up to me and he said, "You're an American. Will Americans be with us?" This was back in February. And I said, somewhat sheepishly, "I think so." Well, the good news is today I can say, I know so. And we see that with the passage of the recent supplemental. I think it shows that with all the challenges, even in an election year when things get kind of crazy and dicey, at the end of the day, America will stand with our allies and friends, and of course, Ukraine shares values with us in so many ways. This is an important juncture, obviously, in the war. And so, Mr. Reznikov, we are delighted to have you here, delighted to learn more, and to look for ways that we can continue to be helpful. This is obviously a time that tests the resolve of the Ukrainian people, but I think we all recognize that they are standing strong. And I think our obligation is to make sure that our Western allies have that same sense of firmness and resolve. And what I can say on behalf of the Kennan Institute and Global Europe and the Wilson Center, we will stand strong. This matters. With due respect to Ukraine, this isn't simply about Ukraine. It is about something far greater. I was also struck in my travels when I went through Moldova and I traveled to Warsaw that our allies in the region were puzzled about the way that our media back here sometimes characterizes what's going on. This isn't a bilateral conflict. This is about authoritarianism on the march, seeking to upend the global Europe and to roll back freedom. And so for Ukraine's sake, but for democracy's sake, for the Europe's sake, for the West's sake, we must stand strong. And again, on behalf of the Wilson Center, I can assure you we will stand strong. Again, welcome. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. And I see some familiar faces in this room. And dear friends, I'm using every opportunity to express my gratitude to the people of the United States for America aid to Ukraine. I would like also to thank the government and especially Congress for their strong bipartisan support, especially after more than 6 months of waiting, but we got this very important decision. And special gratitude I have to raise again and again to my friend, Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, and his team for their personal involvement when they starting supporting us, the idea of the Rammstein contact group, but I call it Rammstein Club because it became the real club of the brotherhoods who are staying with us against the tyranny, and I am absolutely sure that we will win this war, no doubts. And I remember the early stages of our conversations about the weapons for Ukraine in late 2021, and first reaction was, Oleksii, Stingers is impossible. But in January, we got the first package of Stingers from the Litva, from the Vilnius, and I realized that it's possible. After that, I asked our partners to give us artillery systems, battle tanks, air defense systems, and aircrafts, and you know the results. So I'm living in a doctrine, on a narrative that what is impossible today became possible tomorrow. Believe me, I know it in my own experience. And then after the full-scale invasion began, I remember how the Rammstein format developed, and in my experience, all our conversations often focused on our values and beliefs. And just will try to remind you that at this moment, we can just fix that defense forces of Ukraine had destroyed the professional core of Russia's army. The Kremlin had spent hundreds of billions of dollars and 15 years since Putin's famous Munich speech preparing that army. I'm talking hundreds of thousands of soldiers and tens of thousands of pieces of equipment. According to the researching of our colleagues from the United Kingdom, just in the manpower, the losses of Russian army consist probably more than 400,000 personnel killed in actions and wounded in actions. Russia also losses included the flagship cruiser Moskva, you know this story, and a number of warships of the Black Sea Fleet, unique early warning and control aircraft and strategic bombers that Russia cannot produce anymore, the most cutting-edge Russian missiles destroyed with the American weapons. You know the story about the Kinzhal, so-called analog of Net, but we used American's Patriot against this Dragger or Kinzhal and drew down. The most cutting-edge Russian air defense systems like S-400, they too were destroyed with the Western weapons right in front of eyes of buyers in China, India, Turkey, and elsewhere. We have crushed the resources that Russia has been amassing since the Soviet era. The Kremlin's military potential, which had been a threat to Europe, NATO, and every country on the free world, was drastically undermined. I just remind you that in Madrid summit, NATO summit, was adopted new strategy for the next 10 years, and Russia Federation was recognized as the main threat of NATO. And it cost to the United States no more than 3 to 5% of the Pentagon's annual budget. American soldiers were not being killed in the process. The lion's share of assistance funds went to American companies and created new jobs in 40 states. The United States upgraded its arsenal. It is not coincident that a number of congressmen from both parties described support for Ukraine as the best investment into the American security. Russia is a dictatorship where opposition, politicians and journalists are jailed and killed, where the justice systems, human rights, and freedoms have been crushed. The Kremlin finds allies in regimes of the same nature, like Iran and North Korea. We are back to the term of the axis of evil, a coalition of the dictatorships united against the free world. If the aggressors in this coalition are not defeated in Ukraine, that will be new conflagrations around the world, in Europe, in Latin America, in Asia. In those conflicts, American soldiers will be dying. The cost for the United States in terms of different expenditure and economic losses will increase exponentially. This is why it makes practical sense for the United States to support Ukraine right now. All the more so because it will be a success story, Ukraine has every chance to win. Ukrainians have already demonstrated not just outstanding strength, but also outstanding creativity that obviates Russia's numerical superiority. Now Russians can only advance thanks to their air superiority. Their bombs are leveling whole cities. We need to chase away the Russian aviation. To do so, we require air defense systems and F-16s as a component of our air defense systems. Most relevantly, we need to be able to hit military targets on the Russian territory with the American weapons. When we, on our way from our hotel with the Mariana to your respectful Wilson Center, we discussed that fortunately we got this permission to use Western-style weaponry not only on the temporarily occupied territories, but to prevail them in their air near our border, especially protecting Kharkiv, Sumy, and Chernihiv districts. 3 weeks ago, Russians began to advance from the north near the city of Kharkiv, some 15 miles from the Russian border. Ukrainian soldiers have stopped them, and the enemy is suffering heavy losses. But this attempt to advance was only possible because the Russian forces could amass on the Russian territory in the immediate proximity to the border, where we cannot hit them. Right now, we have these options. Equally close to the border are the Russians' MLRS, like Grad, Smerch, Uragan, and missiles complexes that the Russians use to kill Ukrainian civilians. You can check the biggest residential district in Europe, in Kharkiv, it's called Saltovka. So people cannot stay on a bus station because it's risky for them, because the distance is very, very short. So no time for air defense, air raids. So they have no time to go to the shelter. So they need to lose their advantage, I mean Russians. The risks, if there are, no to be wasted. The more time we give them to dig in, the harder will be to budge them. They will also use any delays to adopt to our tactics and to copy our technical solutions. This has happened with the drones. Therefore, Ukraine should not just receive financial and military assistance, but also finally get the recognition for its role in the collective defense. If developed properly, our capabilities will be useful for all. I mean, first of all, NATO allies. What Ukraine can already offer to its partners now is knowledge. Based on our experience on more than 2 years of fighting against the full-scale invasion, I would like to make 8 observations for you. First, the toughest challenge facing the democratic countries on the eve of future conflicts is recognizing threats and making decisions regarding their response to them. Russia has demonstrated how the so-called sub-threshold acts of aggression can be used. Literally anything can be weaponized, including migrants, navigation routes, freedom of speech, food access, and supply chains of various raw materials. Just remind you, the migrants from Syria, they used them via the Belarus land to the Poland, Lithuania, and Ukraine. It was a really weapon. They're trying to ruin the unity of the EU and NATO allies. The second observation is linked to the first. The threat of cognitive warfare is increasing. I mean the warfare that affects our capacity to process information and draw conclusions. This is especially relevant in view of the AI capabilities. Barely a day passes without the news about manipulations involving deep fakes. Russian propaganda makes active use of them. Given the rapid information spread, none of the traditional fact-checking methods are sufficiently fast. We need technical solutions to recognize AI-generated content and response protocols. The traditional disinformation which spreads across the web fast in a large quantities is a related threat. I have a personal example. Last autumn, the BBC posted an expose of an attack against me and my family back from when I was the Minister of Defense. The disinformation campaign created fakes aligning that my daughter bought luxury real estate in Spain and France, and as well as I bought a very pricey car with a golden disc. Probably it was McLaren Mercedes with a golden disc and golden wheels. These fakes were subsequently widely promoted in 5 European languages across Twitter, TikTok, and other social media websites. Using the AI, they provided this like human beings telling them story. They reached dozens of million users in Europe, and administration of TikTok confirmed to the BBC that this is true. I mean, not the story, the truth that they engaged them and used fake accounts and pay a lot of huge sum of money. The goal was evident: to drive down support for Ukraine and slow down the allocation of the weapons we needed. Cognitive warfare is becoming another domain of wars. In this sphere, the opponent is trying to turn democratic freedoms into vulnerability. Third, the cyberspace. The attack on Ukraine in 2022 started with a massive cyber attack. The missiles and tanks followed in its steps. The cyber groups created by or allied with enemy states are an increasing cross-border threat. Our expectation of our own defense and defensive and offensive capability in the cyberspace should increase accordingly. In general, the factors I mentioned are weapons of influence. To meet these challenges, we need political institutions of new quality, as well as technical and technological solutions. What is of crucial importance here is to change our approach from merely responding to threats to taking proactive steps. Otherwise, dictatorships will have an advantage. Ukraine's example demonstrates that a proactive aggressor can be successful. Responding after the fact means that you will suffer huge casualties and damage. I remember when I was a member of the Ukrainian delegation with our President Volodymyr Zelensky 5 or 6 days before the invasion in Munich Security Conference. Our partners told us, guys, this war is imminent, this invasion is imminent, you have to recognize it. Okay, fine. What you will do when they will go across our borders? We will switch on sanctions regime. Let's do it right now. No, we will do it after then they will cross the border. We have results. We have Bucha, we have Irpin, we have Hostomel, we have a lot of casualties, we have a lot of atrocity in our country. Proactive preventative measures have to be activated at the first instance of sub-threshold aggression. I mean, sanctions and more. Let's proceed to combat. 4. Russia reminded the world on the fact that many had forgotten. Autocratic regimes don't care about casualties. Autocracies don't have a limit to acceptable losses. Political expediency is the name of the game for them. Therefore, democratic countries have to be ready to make sure that the potential enemy incurs significant losses and loses combat capabilities. It's not enough to amass high-precision weapons capable of destroying command centers or logistics. The war against authoritarian states turns into a zombie horror. It's a reality. They're using their manpower as a cannon fodder. They're still using the tactics of meat grinder trying to attack in small village on a map. 5. This is one of the last, if not the last, war where you will see large manpower in direct combat. War is increasingly turning into competition between robotic systems as well as automated control systems. President Zelensky's decision to create the unmanned system forces as a branch of the armed forces of Ukraine fits this trend. Manufacture and maintenance of unmanned systems in the quantities commensurate with the number of artillery shells or a manpower is the order of the day. This would entail changing many civilian policies and military doctrines also as well. 6th, the current approach to conducting combat operations, both offensive and defensive, foregrounds the increasingly important role of automation and cybernetization. This is equally true of using open sources for intelligence and data gathering. OSINT and general data analysis are the spheres where the human factor still dominates. But in the relatively near future, within 12 or 36 months, according to estimates, technologies will yield better results than processing the data manually. Obviously, technologies capable of machine learning put on at an advantage. The machines have not learned to learn yet, but they can follow our patterns. And as an old joke had it, can do not what you want them to, but what you asked for. Who will be the first to fully master these technologies? Who will be more effective? It's a question. 7th, the interval between technological growth spurts has decreased dramatically. Historians may debate what were the main technologies that guaranteed an advantage on the battlefield. Iron swords, battle carriers, gunpowder, jets, nuclear weapons, etc. All these have been described as game changers. The interval before a successive game changer was invented decreased every time. The first steps took millennia. The most recent took decades. The interval may be down to months now. 2 years ago, Ukrainian Neptune missiles destroyed the flagship of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, the cruiser Moscow. It was created as an aircraft carrier killer. Today, Ukrainian drones have de facto neutralized the entire Black Sea Fleet of Russia. The base of Crimea are turning into a graveyard for Russian ships. Using the chance, I invite you to join me after then we will win this war to arrange the dive tour to the very famous dive spot or dive site on the Black Sea to see the real wreck cruiser Moscow at the bottom of the Black Sea. Thanks to this, when we did it, it was possible to unblock the port of Odessa first. It was first mission. And after that, it allowed us to arrange grain corridor from the Odessa, Ilyichovsk to the Bosphorus Strait to the Turkey, and after that, to deliver Ukrainian grain, sunflower oils, corn, and other agriculture foods to the Asia countries, to the Africa countries. It's our reaction for the starvation in their countries. And simultaneously, it's economical options to Ukraine to get money, to sell it and get money in continue surviving. We are witnessing new game changers every 6-9 months, not more. We develop FPV drones and gain an advantage. When I became a minister, I heard about FPV drones. I know that it was like toy for kids, for sports, but in reality, we're using them on the battlefield right now. Very efficiency. Electronic countermeasures are improved, and this advantage negates the impact of PV drones. Improving loitering munitions with the computer vision capabilities negates electronic countermeasures and provides another advantage. We have battle-tested the Wunderwaffe that destroys loitering machines or munitions or FPV drones with the lasers, and this disadvantage negates the enemy's earlier advantage. These brief stages that last mere month have the same dramatic impact of the style and methods of combat as replacing arrows with automatic rifles. Those who adopt, evolve, and invest in cutting-edge technologies will have a significant, partially indomitable advantage on the battlefield. This is both inspiring and alarming. Our enemy is cruel and inhuman, but he is far from stupid. Underestimating the enemy is the most egregious mistake. Modern warfare does not just consume the R&D sector benefits, it generates them. And eighth, the slow and unwieldy defense systems are the arrows and early cannons in the war of robots and gadgets. 500 tanks still have an advantage over 3 smart automated anti-tank systems. Will that still be true in 36 months? I'm not sure. That is far from a given. Our goal today is to consolidate the efforts, resources, and political will to harness new and cutting-edge technologies. Ukraine's advantage that we got at a staggering cost is the experience of modern warfare against a highly technological army of an authoritarian state. We have made a number of political and technological conclusions. Not a single other country in the world shares this experience. We can strengthen the coalition that defends democracy. The latest known interview of the Russian ruler demonstrates that it's not just about Ukraine. It's about the mindset of the Kremlin leaders, the mindset shared by the coalition of the authoritarian actors. They will not stop at Ukraine. They're interested in changing the world order. This is why they need to be defeated in Ukraine. It will win the democratic world time to better prepare for the stand off. There is no time to waste. Thank you for your attention.
Is this on? Perfect. Thank you once again, Mr. Reznikov, for this very informative and inspired speech. And let me reiterate how pleased and honored we are to welcome you here at the Wilson Center. You know, as I was listening to you speak, I thought there's each generation has these significant dates in their lives, right? There's July 21st, 1969, Men on the Moon. There's a less fortunate one, September 11th, 2001 for this country, where you basically, your life could be split between the time before and the time after. And for us Ukrainians, it is probably February 24th, 2022. Could you share with us what your day was like, how you met that war, and what was it like being the defense minister to face this onslaught?
You know, when you became a lawyer, you always lawyer, so I have to clarify it because I have professional deformation. It was not date, it was the night or early morning. And you know that I keep in my mind still simultaneously two pictures, two emotions, some kind of like dramatic and some kind of fun. We got all messages from our partners that we have to be ready for this invasion, and we prepared. We provided a little different activities, a special training, military exercises, trying to move our units not on the permanent places, keep them. It allowed us to save lives of our soldiers' first hours and first days. And simultaneously, our leadership delivered to the public, calm down, don't worry, no panic, because we tried to non-block the roads for the armed forces if they will moving. And when I got the phone call from our Chief Commander, General Zaluzhny, it was 4 a.m., probably 4 and 10 minutes. I wake up and got the message from minister, they crossed the border, Ukraine under attack. Okay, General, I will come during 20 minutes, we will meet in our joint office. And I understood that it's a reality. It's a reality check, war started. I didn't want that, but unfortunately, I hope that it will be the second stage like it was in spring 2021, before the Easter holidays, when they also accumulated massive troops in Crimea alongside of our borders and threatening us. And after that, Kremlin leader got the two-phone conversation with the President Biden, and after that personal meeting in Switzerland in July, probably. And they turned the armed forces. So it was not expectation, but it was our hope that probably it's a second stage of their game. But they did it. And I understood I have to do my job. And I kissed my wife and told her, honey, the war started. I mean, open part of the war, because she knows that the war started in 2014, but it was hybrid war, but it's reality. And you have to stay here, and I will inform you what our steps will be next. She woke up and asked me, sorry, I have appointment with my nail treatment and eyelashes. Have I canceled it? Honey, seriously. Wake up, it's a war. You think I have to text to the lady that she have to cancel all appointment? Yes, you have to do it. So but it's a reality, it's a life. And after that I come to office, and in office was General Zaluzhny, his deputy General Masyuk, and General Shaptala, and they were in the process getting different messages from all gadgets was included. iPhones, table phones, internet, everything from the commanders from different sides, what is going on. And after that, I got the phone call from the Oleksii Danilov. He was the Secretary of National Security Council. He informed that President called meeting of the National Security Council, and we launched martial law after 1 hour probably. So I saw President in his office and my colleagues of this council. What is my memory? After that, it was maybe couple days and nights, but in my memory, it's one package of the time. I cannot separate it by day or by night. It was like I became a people of human being who are living in jet lag regime, because I have to communicate with the Secretary of Defense of United States, after that Secretary of Defense of United Kingdom, after that Australian partners, New Zealand, South Korea, Japan, Canada, France. So 24 hours I have to wake up and talking, persuading, arguing. So maybe I slept not more than 2 hours per night, maybe 1 hour and a half. It was probably 3 weeks, 21 days.
That's one very long day.
It was long morning, I would say.
As difficult it must have been physically, I'm sure, the mental strain and the realization of what is actually happening and how to lead the defense agency to respond to that must have been tremendous. You mentioned in your speech that, your first encounters with the Western partners, you heard a lot the word impossible, and then things became possible. And certainly, there's no automaticity in what the Western partners can provide. Ukraine is not a treaty ally, right? There isn't an Article 5 that you can invoke, and suddenly you have, a spread of military assistance that comes to you. So there was a huge amount of work in trying and persuade and convince and communicate, bring together coalitions of partners to give Ukraine that vital support. Could you talk a little bit about this long journey? And as you mentioned, now we're at a stage where President Biden said Ukraine could even use Western-supplied or U.S.-supplied weapons to hit military targets in Russian territory. That's an enormous journey. That's an enormous kind of path to cover. If you could elaborate on that a bit.
I would try to start with my thoughts that lessons should be learned. I think that the first months before and after first days and probably weeks, we saw some kind of reluctance or hesitation, but it's understandable because the key is miscalculation, misestimation of the all kind of analytic centers and intelligence, and you know that it was one short formula. Kiev will fall during 72 hours, or during 3 days, and Ukraine will fall during 3 weeks. It was verdict for your relatives who has the cancer. So no any chance. Your relatives is dying from the cancer. That's why our partners gave us some kind of weaponry for the partisan or guerrillas warfare. Anti-tanks, anti-aircrafts, short systems. Yes, it was very, very sufficient, especially like we started with the Javelin from the United States and NLAW from the United Kingdom, and after that Star Treks, Stingers, and et cetera, et cetera. It helped us to stop them, to defeat them near the Kiev, near the Chernihiv and Sumy, and kick out them from these districts. But serious weaponry was not on it at the table. It was not in an agenda. For what reason to give the serious, sophisticated weaponry to a country who will die, who will fall during three days, 3 nights? But we passed 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, and we're still alive and we're still fighting. It's changed the mindset of leaders in the capitals. I remember how I met in Warsaw with my colleague Dmytro Kuleba, Foreign Minister of Ukraine, with Secretary Blinken, Secretary Austin, and after that, President Biden. It was absolutely another communication. They believed that we can defeat Russians, we can prevail. I was in London. I met with the Secretary of Defense of United Kingdom, Ben Wallace, in March. So Kyiv was still semicircled. I was in London, and we discussed how to change the approach, the philosophy. Not only Soviet-era ammunition we need. We discussed that we have to shift artillery systems for 155, NATO standard. And I delivered after that. We communicated with Ben Wallace. We communicated with Lloyd Austin. In April, it was the first meeting of Rammstein club. I call it club. And we got the message that we will have 1st Division M777 from the United States, 155 millimeter caliber. And we got it in May. Artillery 155, it's a first game changer in this war. Somebody thinking that MLRS like HIMARS was the first game changer. Not. Artillery 155, it's a first game changer. MLRS systems like HIMARS, M270, LRU, and Mars became the second game changer in July 2022. And my idea was to deliver to partners for what reason we need something new. And I used formula. Every Rammstein, I tried to deliver them, and before Rammstein meeting, on a bilateral discussions and virtual meetings, personal meetings, I used different formula, like we need organic unit. It means not only grab artillery systems from the Poland, artillery systems plus fly-eye UAV for the reconnaissance, plus counter-battery equipment. Or if it's Caesar from the France, please give us drones and counter-battery systems. If it's Americans, M777 or M109, Puma drones and counter-battery with the different complicated names. After that, I used mission-operated approach formula. So we need, for example, to stop Russians, their threats in the Black Sea, trying to grab Odessa. We need to clear Black Sea from them. We need to arrange so-called freedom of navigation during the maritime also, but that's why we need anti-ship missiles Harpoon. We need, again, drones for the operational awareness and satellite pictures. It should be everything in one package. I think that it was a good approach because our partners understood, they needed, that's why 1, 2, 3, 4 reasons. It's understandable for the civilians, and understandable for the military personnel, and that's why I got next results. Artillery systems, counter-battery systems, after that infantry fighting vehicles, different types, battle tanks, aircrafts, air defense systems as the Patriot, NASAM, SAMS-T, IRIS-T, and Gepard, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when it was December 2022, we prepared some like Twitter short footage. We used metaphor, then Minister of Defense writing the wish list to the Santa. And in this wish list was F-16. It's a small model of F-16 staying on my table. And, mission completed. We will have F-16. So only Death Star still is an agenda.
Death Star. I suppose it is easier to explain why you need all the ingredients when you can say what is it that you're trying to cook in the end, right? So I want to ask you about this the saying that's essentially attributed to General Zaluzhny, Ukraine's former military commander, that a small Soviet army will never be able to defeat a large Soviet army, meaning that if Ukraine fights the way, sort of its legacy Soviet way of fighting versus up against Russia that also uses many of these Soviet ingrained ways of fighting, there'll be no advantage for Ukraine. Could you explain a little bit how Ukrainian armed forces adapted, how they evolved over time? What are these most important mechanisms for learning when you are in the middle of the war?
You're absolutely right. I think that part of this misunderstanding and misestimating before this full-scale invasion was that small Soviet army will fight with the big Soviet army, and certainly small army will lose. But when President Zelensky asked me in 2021 to be defense minister, his demands or his task for me was reforms. Reforms from the Soviet Union legacy in our armed forces, in Ministry of Defense as well. 30 years we lived with the previous background. But simultaneously, after 2014, after the occupation of Crimea and Lugansk and Donetsk, our armed forces or defense forces, not only armed forces, plus National Guards, border guards, security services, military intelligence services, they became new. Most of our generals didn't serve in Soviet army. 30 years they served in Ukrainian army. Certainly all armies, they have hierarchy inside them. It's normal because they became a cadet, after that young lieutenant, after that colonel, and so say every time they have subordinating among them. It's not Soviet standard. As I heard some of the famous Americans, general, probably it was Marines, told that armed forces of the United States have to protect democracy. For that reason, they will not use democracy inside the units. I think the same should be in Ukrainian armed forces. But my understanding that our secret is democracy in Ukrainian armed forces, because we got a lot of volunteers. And first stage, 2014, they became soldiers, and innovation, creativeness became the part of Ukrainian approach against Russians. That's why I'm always using this metaphor about David and Goliath, because Goliath was monster with the muscles and huge capacity. But David was brave, smart, creative, and he used sling. I think it's absolutely relevant metaphor in this situation. That's why I'm absolutely sure that we will win this war. So in Ukrainian armed forces, we have a lot of reforms. Not all finished, no. We have a long way, especially when this open part of the war started. I have no time to provide only reforms. You have to provide reforms and simultaneously trying to persuade partners to give you weaponry, to buy something via third countries, because, for example, 152, 122, it's a Soviet ammunition. You cannot buy directly on Amazon. You have to use different types of contract ways using your partners, third countries. This is not directly, it's not a business like as usual. And simultaneously, you have to continue reforms. It's a task. It's a task with the stars, I would say. But I see that in reality, Ukrainian armed forces or defense forces became absolutely new, modern armed forces, and that's why we are ready to share of our knowledge, our experience with our partners, and be a really full-fledged member of the security alliance. We can call it NATO, we can call it in another way, but we have a really what we can share with our partners.
Thank you so much for that. I think it is very true that, as much as Ukraine can learn and adopt best practices from NATO country, it's certainly a two-way process. Ukraine is the only country that has now been in such a large-scale industrial kind of warfare with the Russian Federation. And on that note, you are perhaps the only defense minister who led the country against a nuclear-armed adversary that has actively used nuclear threats to shield its invasion, its aggressive plans, but also now we know has contemplated the use of tactical nuclear weapons, allegedly, on Ukrainian territory. Could you speak a little bit to this nuclear threat? What are we to make of it?
It's interesting. I got some messages from our partners that Russians started using the new approach, informational approach, that Ukraine will use dirty bomb. I got a phone call from the Ben Wallace, from the Lloyd Austin, and they told me that, Oleksii, you have to know that Shoigu call us and say Ukrainians will use dirty bomb. That's why I understood that maybe they grabbed something from the Chernobyl nuclear station when they occupied them. And I asked my colleague, Minister German Galushenko, Minister of Energy in Ukraine, to check all stockpiles in Chernobyl. Are they everything okay, or they grab something? And we're trying to be very, very careful with this information. We realized that they could use some kind of nuclear potential against us as a casus belli pretext against us. But you know that you're living in a high level of cortisol and adrenaline in your blood, 24 hours, 7 days, 7 nights, 1 month, second, third. It became your standard of your life. When you hear next kind of threat, for us, doesn't work. Because we know that we can die, because we are fighting for our surviving. We have no any chance. They want to destroy us, to wipe out Ukrainian nation from the map. It's their goal. Putin delivered it to the American journalist in his interview. And the messages about that Russians can use nuclear weaponry against us doesn't work against us. It cannot threaten us. Maybe it can be like a threat for the partners still, but it's not. We are not afraid, because we have no any chance. We will fight in any case. That's why it's not workable against us.
Yeah, it seems that Ukraine is the one country that's not deterred by Russia's nuclear threat, as you say, because what are the choices? I want to turn to your experience as a negotiator. You've actually negotiated in a number of different formats with the Russian interlocutors after 2014 over Donbass and temporarily occupied territories there. What has your experience been like engaging with the Russians, and how do you assess the prospect of, you'd hear a lot of people now and then bring up the prospect of negotiations, because allegedly all wars end with those. Are you optimistic about that?
Short reaction, I always optimist, in any case. Maybe I have to say that professionally I'm a lawyer, and I was a trial attorney, and simultaneously I was a head of alternative dispute resolution practice in my law company as a partner. So negotiation is one of my specialization. So I did a lot of negotiation in the business conflicts. Have a lot of amicable agreement as a result. After that, when I became secretary of city council and deputy mayor, it was also negotiation with the members of city council, a lot of discussions. And when I joined to the Ukrainian delegation in Minsk process in 2019, I became a deputy head of Ukrainian delegations. I spent 2 years with the Russians at the table trying to negotiate according to the Minsk agreement, trying to find the best solutions to restore, to reintegrate our territories without war, without weaponry. And I have a lot of lessons about negotiation in the diplomatic field, especially with the Russians. And at this moment, I'm preparing my course of seminars for the university about the practical side of negotiation, not theoretical like Harvard negotiation school, but practical study case. So I will be happy to share with your colleagues in Harvard maybe after the summer. I have to check it in Ukrainian university. I will do it. In negotiation, very important to see that your counterparts have a subjective power. So they are really a subject. They have a really authority to negotiate with you for the result, or it's just playing game. Russians playing this game when, for example, Boris Gryzlov, head of Russian delegation in Trilateral Contact Group, and simultaneously he has a Dmitry Kozak, who was a really with the authority, with the power. So other as just troop of players on a theater, and you have to indicate who is really with the power. Or when we have 3 stages of negotiation with them in Belarus after the full-scale invasion and last in Istanbul. The first was on 28th of February, after 4 days from the full-scale invasion started. And I saw the persons at the table, no authority, no desire to get the result in reality. But somebody staying behind them with a virtual nagan or pistol near their head. It's not easy to communicate because you cannot believe to your counterparts, because you cannot see the real interest to negotiate, to reach the result. And you think, is it possible to get wisdom and fair result, amicable agreement? So when Russians sending message, we are ready to sit at the table, this is not true. This is a bluff, because they will not negotiate it if they have a strong position, never. They will play a game with you. In reality, they will negotiate if they will in a weak positions. So all negotiators have to have the time. And when we hear some ideas from the China partners of Russia, or I remember last year in Singapore forum in Shangri-La, some Indonesian ministers sent the idea that they have an Indonesian plan, peaceful resolutions of this. They call it conflict. I hate this word conflict or crisis in Ukraine. It's a war. It's a real war in Ukraine. It's a real war on the globe. And yes, all wars could be finished at the table. It's possible. But it's possible if counterparts are really ready to negotiate, they really see their interest to finish this war. It's very important to finish this war. If they will not have this desire, will not a real negotiation. It will be just next stage of theater.
Absolutely. So I will invite in a minute all of you to pose your own questions, and those also online, watching us online, our audiences. And while you're thinking about the questions, I have one last one from myself to Mr. Reznikov. Tell us, please, Mr. Reznikov, why is Ukraine's victory not only possible, but very likely? And what has to be in place? What conditions have to be met to achieve this result, technologically, politically, and otherwise?
My conclusion is that the war, it's a competition of resources. The war is a math. For example, on a battlefield, we can use artillery shell 155. One shell costs approximately $3,000. Maybe more, maybe less, but approximately 3,000. And if you want to engage battle tank, you have to do it twice, if you are lucky. 6,000 against $8 million, because one T-90 approximately costs $7 million. And we're using FPV drones. One FPV drones without thermovision costs $500. You can use one or two or maybe maximum 3 FPV drones against battle tank. So it means $1,000 against $8 million instead of $6,000, I mean 2 shells. So you have to manage your resources, and if it's a war of resources, it means that small Ukraine, small David, can use resources of his partners, of his allies, financial, economical, political, technological, against the Eve, against the Goliath. Because if you will really stop, if you will really switch on sanctions regime, and they will have no any options to get your sophisticated details, your cameras, your AI options, and IC, and et cetera, et cetera. They will not have capacity to produce weaponry against us. And it will reduce their military capacity. It's in the interest of the United States also, because again, Russia Federation recognized as the main threat of NATO allies, officially. It means if we will reduce their military potential, the military capacity of Russian Federation at the battlefield in Ukraine, it means minimize risks or threats to the NATO countries. So if we have a budgets of NATO countries allies behind our back, we will win this war. It's reality, because again, this is war, it's a math. It's a war of resources.
That's
and
quite,
technologies at these moments, especially.
that's a quite simple and complicated answer all at the same time. But
It's everything in life.
You say it's about the math. Do we have questions in the audience? They're here in the first row.
Well, my name is Lucian Kim. I'm a former Wilson Fellow, journalist, now working at International Crisis Group.
Lucian, I'm going to ask you to wait 1 second while we get a microphone. Otherwise, our online participants can't hear. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Reznikov. My name is Lucian Kim. I'm a former Wilson Center Fellow, longtime journalist covering Ukraine. Now I'm with the International Crisis Group focused on Ukraine, and I just returned from my first trip since the full-scale invasion. I have a question regarding NATO membership and the bilateral agreements which Ukraine is signing now. I think realistically, also even in Kiev, people realize that the extension of an invitation to NATO under these conditions is rather unlikely, also in regards to the Washington summit. However, there's great hope, and it seems like there are indications that the U.S. is about to sign this bilateral agreement with Ukraine. Could you explain the significance of that, what you are hoping, what Ukraine is hoping to get out of the bilateral agreement, also how these bilateral agreements with other countries are going to help Ukraine? Thank you.
Thank you. Previous year, when we waited the summit in Vilnius, we also had expectations that probably we will hear as a real signal that our full-fledged membership is possible. Especially, I tried to remind to our partners that if we are in a war, this is not the reason argument, because we know the story of Germany. Germany was divided, but in the constitution law, Germany was fixed that their dream to again reconstruct territory of Germany as a one country. And we know that it's done, mission completed. And Germany became a member of the NATO when part of their country was under the Soviet era control, Soviet regime, I would say. And but in reality, we understand that during this stage of war, it's impossible. I discussed it with my colleagues, defense ministers in Brussels during the meeting. After the Ramstein meeting, it was a meeting of NATO ministers. And they all understood that when this war will finish, it's in interest of NATO countries to get Ukrainians on a board, because we have a real experience how to defeat Russians, how to deter them, how to fight them using NATO weaponry. It's absolutely understandable. It's a win-win case. If you will check Ukrainian social survey, social poll, you will see that more than 80% of Ukrainians believe that we will be the member of NATO, because it's in interest of Ukrainians. It's our security design, how to live after the war with the neighbor. Because Russians, unfortunately, will not fly to the space using Elon Musk's invention. They will steal our neighbor. And we'll need to find the solutions how to live in peaceful coexistence systems. So the main, the ideal design or architecture should be if Ukraine became a full-fledged member of the NATO and EU. But Ukraine will eastern wall of the Europe against orcs. We call them orcs because the armed forces of Russians, their behavior after the Bucha, European, and Hostomel, we see that this is an army of the looters, rapists, and murderers. That's why we call them orcs. And it's it's an interest of NATO to invite Ukraine to be the equal member. When I was in a room of NATO as a guest, it was, you know, that in this room, all representatives of the NATO countries sitting at the alphabet formula. So, General Secretary, his deputies, and after that, Albania, Bulgaria, Greece, Turkey, United Kingdom, United States. After that, empty place for guests. When I saw that tables, UK, USA, UA, it's absolutely reasonable. I asked General Secretary Jens Stoltenberg, keep this place for UA. This is our place. And symbolically, Washington Agreement was signed 75 years ago. So it would be anniversary this summer. At this summer, it would be 33 years of independence period of time of Ukraine. Right now, after the joining of Finland and Sweden to the NATO, in NATO alliance you have 32 countries. It's absolutely fair to invite Ukraine to be the 33rd country of the NATO. Bilateral. Yes, I think it's a start of the journey to the full-fledged membership. That's why it's very important that Ukraine signed agreement with the United Kingdom. Just I saw the news that President Zelensky signed agreement in Spain, Portuguese, and previous a meeting with the leaders of the European countries. So, and as you know, that Japan is not the member of the NATO. Taiwan is not the member of the NATO. Israel is not the member of the NATO. But they have bilateral agreement with the United States. United States is a leader of the civilized world in a globe. That's why for our interest to have this bilateral agreement, when we will see that we have potential to develop our future force. We need to discuss future force concept, how we will protect Ukraine and how we will protect Europe together against the, unfortunately, tyrannical regime in Russia and other allies of acts of evil. It's alive. And we need to think on a long perspective. That's my understanding. So I will not discuss the details of this bilateral agreement because I think that a lot of them have the status like classified.
Well, it's you. Yeah. Oh.
Thank you very much. I just want to know if you can help all of us armchair generals as to what the current state of the war is in Kharkiv. Because we hear all these statements from the Russians especially, that they're taking small villages and so forth, but we really don't have a lot of evidence as to what is going on the ground. So if you could just talk a little bit about the current state of battle, and especially in the Kharkiv.
I discuss it with our real guys who has expertise, our generals. And again, I'm civilian, you know.
I'm just a lawyer.
Yeah, so you have also professional deformation as me. But as I understand, this is a local movement of Russian armed forces which has not any strategic sense. For them, it's politically important because, just example, when we met with the Russian delegations in Belarus in February and after that in March, every time they tried to persuade us that after 2 days, they will control administrative border of Lugansk and Donetsk district. Because for them it was a task, because they included their territories to their constitution as a part of Russia Federation. That's why they told us, we will control this territory. Okay, fine, we'll wait. 1, 2, 3 days, nothing. For them, it's like fixed idea to control Lugansk and Donetsk district plus Kherson and Zaporizhia because they also included to the constitution. And I think that they're trying to provide the local success because they need to report something to Kremlin. In Soviet mindset of their generals, they want to be a killer messenger. They want to be a positive messenger. They need some small or little success. That's why they're trying to do it. In reality, they have no capacity to go forward seriously because that I told you in my speech, they really have not professional core in their manpower capacity. They have manpower, huge, because they have 130 millions of population. They have options to get more Mobics. But after the liberation of Hostomel airport, I was there on the next day with General Syrsky and Minister Monastyrsky. And we just provided short awarding ceremony to the soldiers who cleared this territory, battalion. And the commander of this battalion showed us the registration book of Rosgvardia unit. 120 members of this unit was killed in actions, totally, in Hostomel. And I saw this book, and family name, nationality, position, rank, and age. And I saw that all of them had middle age 35 years. What it means? He was 18 and became conscript, served 2 years in his Russian army. After that, he signed the contract as a professional and spent plus 15 years as a professional. It means training camps, missions in Syria and Chechnya, and something else. So it was a professional corps. All of them died. The same in Bakhmut, the same in Kherson operation with the Marines, with the air assault units. When we saw the documents that Marines come from Pacific Ocean brigades of Russia, it means that they have no capacity in the European part of Russia. So they have manpower, but they have no professional corps. It's very important. They have no morale and professional brave approach. Because near the Moshun, it was a very dangerous battle near the Kiev, their air assaults soldiers really were very brave. Really. It's true. That's why they're trying to show, it's show for them. But at this moment, in the front line, we have like stable moment. We have no also capacity to go through, unfortunately, because we're waiting for the next game changer. Next game changer would be F-16, because Russians still have superiority in the air. It's very important. You cannot provide land operation without superiority in the air. Su-35 can see, using their radars, approximately on 180 kilometers, and using their missiles, they can engage target more than 120 kilometers. MiG-29, it's a Soviet-era aircraft that we use, can see only 60 kilometers, and using missiles on a 30 kilometers distance. That's why it's very important to have F-16 in our Ukrainian sky. It will change the battlefield on the ground also.
I saw the gentleman over there in the back has been waiting very patiently. Maybe we'll then collect a couple more questions.
No, thank you. Kristen Forstner, Hans Seidel Foundation. When the full-blown war broke out in February 22, there was the assumption in many capitals in Europe that Kiev will be taken within 3 days. Why did it not happen?
All right, let's maybe get another question, because right here in the front. Oh, right. Oh.
Thank you so much. My name is Elena Buketova, Democracy Fellow at Center for European Policy Analysis, CIPA. I'm also Ukrainian. So a few questions. You talked about irregular warfare and cognitive warfare. How to win this war with the Russians? That's the first question. And how to help those people who are in the temporarily occupied Ukrainian territories? As a former defense minister, how to directly help them, if there is a way to help them? Thank you.
Again, it was my understanding, it was miscalculation, misestimation of Ukrainians. I discussed with one of our head of intelligence before the full-scale invasion. I asked him, do we have maybe information, or our partners, what the agencies of Russia in Ukraine reported to the Kremlin? What assumption they have if they will go across the border? I got the interesting answer. Yes, Minister, we have information. We shared it with our partners. And summary of this report, which their influencers reported to the Kremlin, was that in the case of full-scale invasion, 30% of Ukrainians will support Russian troops and will meet them with the flowers at the street and hurrah, hurrah, crying. 60% of Ukrainians will indifferent. Okay, this power, king, Tsar, doesn't matter. I think that assumption was done under the Crimea experience, because in Crimea a lot of Soviet people lived. So. And only 10% will fight. Only 10% will resist. And mostly of them will fight on the western part of Ukraine. I asked my colleague, sorry, but Ukrainians has 40 million. 10% means 4 million. If 4 million will fight, it's a lot of. If they used 140,000 soldiers trying to grab or capture Grozny during the Chechnya war, how they will trying to occupy Kyiv? Because in Kyiv only maybe 4 or 5 inhabitants. As a former deputy mayor, I remember these figures. 4 million against them. It's absurd. Yes, minister, but they will make their decision under these figures. And maybe some capitals of the world also get this information and believed in this information. It was a mistake. Especially in the Russian-speaking districts like Kharkiv, Sumy, Chernihiv, near the Volnovakha, Mariupol, Azov Sea, it's mostly Russian-speaking population of Ukraine. They hated them because they killed them, their kids, they ruined everything of their lives. I recommend you to see the documentary film Freedom and Fire. Evgeny Afinievsky, it's just freshly. He fixed everything about that. And he discussed with the Russian-speaking Ukrainians in Mariupol, in Volnovakha, in Kharkiv, and you will get the answer. And for us, it was the question of surviving. We will fight or we will die. We decided to fight. And also our armed forces were ready, because we moved them. It was separate commander post under the General Syrsky in Kyiv. General Zaluzhny was responsible for the other direction. So we were ready. Yes, using our capacity. But civilians became the fighters. So old grandma informed using their phones where is the Russian unit staying, where is the tank column. And after that, we're using the word ice with the drones, and after that, artillery engaged the targets. And also, I discussed with the General Nikoluk, he was responsible for the Chernihiv district. I asked him, General, was something what surprised you? And he told me, yes, minister, because according to the academic book, I mean military academic book, you have to go with the aviation, artillery, iron fist like battle tanks and others, and after that infantry. Then they go through the Chernihiv to the Kyiv from the Brovary direction. They left artillery behind them, no helicopters, no aviations, only tanks on a highway. And I personally saw the parade uniform in the tanks and infantry fighting, because they were sure that they will marching in the Kyiv after three days. It was also miscalculation from their side.
And the question?
Sorry, and temporarily occupied territories. You know, I was before, in the previous reincarnation, I was a vice prime minister, minister of reintegration temporarily occupied territories. So it's a serious program should be, how to help to Ukrainians who lived in temporarily occupied territories. It was a task during the hybrid war. It's a serious task or order to do it right now. But right now we have to liberate them, first of all. And after that, we will provide reintegration. A lot of questions. Humanitarian demining, it's a question. Rebuilding, restoring, justice, scope of work. But there are no detailed recipe, honestly.
So we're almost out of time, but I'll take maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Is that all right? Okay. Sir, you and
Mike.
My name's Mark. business background, Microsoft, long-term Kiev resident. You can choose one or two of these. They're big topics, but just your observations. First topic, only real hope for Russia to change generationally would be for Ukraine victory. If you think that's true, explain why. Second, limited awareness of the war from most average Ukrainians and Russians before, just did not think it was happening. The limited awareness, why was that? And any further comments on the adapt and innovate side? You mentioned F-16, but you may have another. If there's not enough time, you can choose which you would like to respond to.
What?
So there were three kind of propositions that you were invited to comment on, and you could choose one of them if you.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe while you're thinking, let's take another question.
Hi, Emina Muzaferiev, PhD candidate at Virginia Tech and a coordinator of the Western Balkan Center at the New Lines Institute. Now, you've just, Mr. Reznikov, mentioned demining, and excuse the specificity of my question, but during your time as a defense minister of Ukraine, you have witnessed Ukraine not only succeed in Bosnia as Europe's most landmine country, but also becoming a host of the world's biggest minefield. Now, what I'm wondering is if you could elaborate on how have the landmines played into the war and into Ukraine's defense against Russia, and how does the Ukrainian government think about landmines as an issue, as an obstacle, and if you could also mention something about demining plans.
Cognitive warfare. Sorry, I forget it to react. I think that we need to change our approach. We need to realize and recognize that we have new inhabitant in the globe, AI. And we have to be first using AI to recognize cognitive warfare and after that to deliver to the population what is true, what is fake. For example, when I was in Japan, I met very famous professor, Dr. Tamabechi in Japan. He has cognitive laboratory. He probably more than 10 years searching this question, this issue, especially when he see that China trying to using cognitive warfare against Taiwan. And he invented software, and his software is using on a commander post of Defense Forces of Japan. They see not only missiles in the sky or ships in the sea, they see the cognitive waves trying to capture minds, hearts, and souls. It's a serious task, and it's like a cyberspace also. If I have to choose one options, I will choose all types of air defense systems, because it's very important to close sky in Ukraine in different ways. Air defense systems, aircrafts, electronic warfare, everything. Because it's allowed us to live under the umbrella. Kids will go to the kindergarten, to the university, hospitals will provide, and we will do business. We will earn money, we will pay taxes, that will give resources to the government to continue fighting. This is a key note of resilience, I think, if I will choose. That's why we asking, air defense, Patriots, NASAM, SAMTE, everything, F-16. Because F-16, it's not for striking, it's for, there's a part of air defense systems. Demining. When I was Vice Prime Minister, I also tried to research this question. I was in Croatia, in Azerbaijan, in Karabakh after the liberation. And when I became defense minister, according to the Ukrainian law, defense minister is a head of national demining agency. So I set up this agency. It's just freshly new government border. I joined all different ministers, agency to do it together. So we are checking a map and we're trying to find partners how we will provide the humanitarian demining process after this, when we will win war. But we do it right now, especially for the freedom of navigation in the Black Sea, in the Danube River, in the Dnipro River, and all liberated territories, especially in Odessa, Mykolaiv, and Kherson. Farmers go to the local authorities, ask them, please demine, I will do my job as a farmer. And I think that if we will use current technology, it means that 1 day of war brings 3 days of demining as minimum. So we have 10 years of this war, 10 years. It means that we will need 30 years for demining. But I believe that modern technology will help us to do it as soon as possible. In the water and the land, everywhere. It's a serious task because it's a question of security architecture also.
We have reached.
And government do it. We have a special agency, so we're seriously thinking about that.
Sorry, we've reached the limit of our time, although certainly not the limit of interest in the topic. Please join me in thanking Mr. Reznikov for this very interesting conversation, but also for his leadership in this really important time. Thank you.
Thank you. I will take it to the gentleman.
Of course.